Inaugurations are events that can shape history. Kennedy's Ask Not What Your Country Can Do For You, that was an inauguration. Lincoln saying malice toward none, charity for all, that was an inauguration. Inaugurations can define presidencies.
The president has had an experience of 4 years. He's become a changed person. So in some ways it's even more interesting to see that reflection of what he's been through come through in that second address.
One thing that presidents have done is to use the second inaugural to announce a new policy. For instance, Truman in 1949 talked about Point 4, this effort to help the United States image around the world. So that actually had some substance and was concrete, and people remember it for that.
You know, when you have a second term, there's nothing left to run for except your place in history. You are setting out what you want to do. This is what you want your place in history to be. This is what you want to accomplish. That's what you're doing in the second inaugural.
The most kinetic and exciting of all the inaugurals was Barack Obama in 2008. A lot of history kind of converged. I mean, first off, obviously, the first African-American president. And the president, I thought wisely, went a part of it coming to Washington. He went from Philadelphia to DC like Washington did, but more importantly like Lincoln had done.
I think there's certain kinds of situations that Lincoln would understand that he had to deal with. I mean, when Lincoln first came into his presidency, all of a sudden the South has started to secede. He hardly was in the office for 24 hours before he had to make some really tough decisions, and so too with President Obama. I mean, there was no time when he first came in for him to just relax, oh, I'm in the White House. He had immediately to face a very, very serious crisis. And I think Lincoln would say to him, you know, that you learn from that.
The amazing thing is that historians who will write about Barack Obama 30 or 40 years from now may look at aspects of his presidency that we aren't even thinking about right now, because oftentimes in history, things that seemed obsessively important at the time a president served, oftentimes 40 years later seem almost trivial, and the opposite is also true, and that's why history is so interesting.
Getting that second term, first of all, it means that the public has given you a legitimacy for what you did in the first term. And then you have more time span to really finish the things you were hoping to get done. So obviously Lincoln getting that second term is able to win the Civil War, to end slavery and save the Union. Roosevelt is able to go on and become the president who leads the Allied forces in World War II. All these things are only possible with that second term. So I think in some ways it's a big deal to have won a second term.
Dwight Eisenhower solidifying the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Interstate Highway, creating of NASA, saving of our biggest wildlife refuge, Anwar. That was all Ike's second term.
You watch that inaugural ceremony and listen to the speech, you've heard almost an autobiography, because the president is the one who makes most of the choices about who speaks and what poems, if there are some, are read. So in a way, if you knew absolutely nothing about the president and just watched that ceremony, you'd know an awful lot about him by the end. We Americans, when you think about it, we have relatively few national ceremonies where everyone is watching and everyone is united. This is one unifying, pure moment, and that is something that people should be very glad to have.